Yellowstone National Park is famous for its geysers, its wildlife and yes, that big volcano it's sitting on top of. It contains the largest active volcano in the contiguous United States and one of the world's supervolcanoes, which are volcanoes that have had eruptions big enough to blot out the sun and kill everything around them. But while the Park Service does keep an eye on it, it's not the only supervolcano we need to keep tabs on. There are 6 more just waiting to blow. Hi, I'm here with Minute Earth. And even though the Yellowstone supervolcano hasn't erupted since the Pleistocene epoch, scientists think it will again. That's because the Yellowstone hotspot, the thing that's fueling the volcano, is still active and moving slowly to the northwest. That means that someday soon the town of West Yellowstone, Montana, could be looking at a magma chamber the size of downtown Los Angeles, filled with molten rock. But there are other hotspots with their own magma chambers beneath the surface too. These are the other supervolcanoes you haven't heard of. Let's start with the Long Valley supervolcano in California. Long Valley Caldera, that's the name of the volcano and also the name of the lake that sits in its crater. The two formed about 760,000 years ago after a series of increasingly large eruptions deposited ash over much of California and Nevada. At its largest, the volcano was about 23 by 28 kilometers across. Today, it's a bit smaller than that after another really big eruption about 6.6 million years ago created the deep basin that now holds the Sierra Nevada's highest alpine lake. You can find this volcano near the eastern Sierra, about halfway between Yosemite National Park and Death Valley, and it's so vast that you can't really see its full extent without Google Earth. But you can see Mono Lake, which formed in the supervolcano's Caldera. Its water is so salty that it's actually a brine, meaning all the water has evaporated off, leaving behind a bunch of salts and other minerals. So, if you go for a swim, make sure to wear your goggles. But back to the volcano. It is considered dormant, meaning that while it may erupt again, we don't expect it to anytime soon. Unlike Yellowstone, there aren't any active earthquake swarms or changes in gas emissions or uplift to suggest that a large eruption is imminent. But scientists do worry about the potential for smaller flank eruptions, which are eruptions that happen outside of the main caldera. Those are more difficult to predict, but also less dangerous. A flank eruption would send lava down the eastern slope of the volcano, which is mostly unpopulated. Most of the people who live nearby live on the western side of the valley, where the land rises steeply from the lake. If lava were to spill over the eastern rim of the caldera, it would travel a long way before it hit anything. Of course, a larger eruption could affect more people. While scientists say that such an event is unlikely, a few researchers argue that the 760,000-year-old eruption that formed the caldera was much more powerful than previously thought. They say it was likely a sequence of very large explosions that sent ash all the way to South America. If they're right, then maybe the Long Valley supervolcano is more active than we thought. It's a similar story at New Zealand's White Island, also known as Whakaari, which has been erupting steadily since 1914 and is the most volcanically active island in the country. This stratovolcano has had many periods of quiet dormancy broken by brief periods of high activity, including its latest eruption in December 2019. The small island is only 122 square kilometers wide and has a summit crater that reaches 361 meters above sea level. Tourists often visit White Island because it looks awesome. During the most recent eruption, a tourist boat carrying 47 people approached the island to give visitors a closer view when the eruption happened. 20 people died, many from breathing in volcanic gases and ash. In 2012, scientists studying White Island used a thermal camera to peer inside its crater and saw something unexpected, a magma chamber. Now we knew that the volcano had a magma chamber beneath it because it's an active volcano, but this was the first time we'd actually seen the magma chamber itself. They estimated that the chamber held about 45 million cubic meters of magma, which could fuel another eruption like the one in 1914, and the findings raised another: why did the magma chamber suddenly appear? They suspected that magma was moving from deeper underground up into the shallow magma chamber. The December 2019 eruption was the first evidence of that. In fact, the researchers wrote in their paper that their discovery might help identify future eruptions before they happen. Here in the contiguous US, the next supervolcano on our list is a little less well known. It's Medicine Lake, located in northern California's Cascade Range. Medicine Lake is a caldera formed by the Medicine Lake volcano. No one knows exactly when the volcano formed because it's been covered by tens of meters of ash and pumice. But its most recent eruption was about 300 years ago. Today, it looks like a pretty normal lake. The town of Lemoyne sits on its shores, and people enjoy boating and fishing in its waters. But if you look closely, you can see that the lake is a bit murky, which indicates that its depths are hiding something. Scientists know that beneath its surface lies a magma chamber. They discovered it in the late 1950s, when they recorded the first local earthquakes, some of which were felt as far away as San Francisco. That's not surprising, given that the city is only about 240 kilometers from the volcano. What's surprising is that no one noticed that the volcano existed until the 1950s. Maybe that's because, unlike Yellowstone, whose massive geyser basins can be seen from space, Medicine Lake's features are pretty subtle. There's a slight bulge in the ground, a few hot springs, and a couple of steaming fumaroles. Those are vents that release steam and gases. But it's not as dramatic as Yellowstone, which makes sense given that its last eruption was about 300 years ago, and its caldera isn't even completely filled in yet. That said, scientists are keeping an eye on it, especially considering that more than 1 million people live within 160 kilometers of the volcano. There are a lot of supervolcanoes here in North America. On our continent alone, there are 12 of them. But our next one is all the way across the Atlantic Ocean in the Azores archipelago. The Azores are 9 volcanic islands surrounded by deep ocean trenches and seamounts. They sit atop the Azores-Gibraltar Fracture Zone, a transform fault that runs along the mid-Atlantic ridge, the divergent plate boundary that runs through the middle of the Atlantic, and the islands themselves are the result of hotspot activity. The biggest island in the archipelago is São Miguel, which contains the world's largest active volcanic lake, Lagoa das Sete Cidades, or the Lake of the Seven Cities. As its name suggests, this lake has a colorful history. According to legend, 7 Moorish kings fled the Spanish Inquisition by sailing to the Azores, building a great city on the island and living happily ever after. Whether or not that story is true, what is true is that the lake is the result of volcanic activity. The lake is actually 2 calderas, one nested inside the other, both formed by the collapse of the Cerro das Empadadas volcano. The outer caldera is 5 by 8 kilometers across, and the inner one is 3 by 5 kilometers. Together they form a giant pear shape, and each holds a lake. What makes the island special, though, is its central lake, Lagoa das Sete Cidades, which formed about 2,000 years ago after the collapse of the volcano. The lake fills the inner caldera, and its blue and green colors come from variations in depth, not pollution or algae blooms. The western part is deeper and greener, and the eastern part is shallower and bluer, and it's all thanks to the way the lake formed. When the caldera collapsed, rock from the volcano slid into the gap, creating a natural dam. The eastern section of the dam was higher, creating a smaller lake in the east and a larger lake in the west. Over time, those lakes became stratified, with the denser, colder water sinking to the bottom and the warmer, less dense water floating on top. That meant that sunlight couldn't reach the bottom of the lake in the western section, so algae couldn't grow there, resulting in the greener color. The eastern section of the lake, though, received more light, so algae flourished, giving it a bluish tint. If you want to experience the beauty of this place for yourself, there are tours available. But you should probably hold off on buying those tickets until the local volcano stops rumbling. That's because scientists think that the island's magma chamber extends deep below the lake, and recently they've started detecting earthquakes related to the magma chamber. So far, they haven't detected any changes in the lake itself, which might indicate that the magma chamber is filling. But scientists will keep watching just in case. Our last supervolcano is somewhere you might not expect, under the ice sheet in Antarctica. We know surprisingly little about this largely unexplored continent, but we're learning more every day, including about the Big Ben orogeny, a mountain range that stretches almost the entire length of the Antarctic peninsula. The range was created when the Pacific and Antarctic plates collided, but these days it's being sculpted by both tectonic forces and ice. Scientists think that beneath the ice sheet is a magma chamber that may eventually erupt to create a new volcano. That's because the whole region is seismically active. There are lots of earthquakes beneath the ice, and they happen regularly. In fact, in 2020, researchers reported the first swarm of earthquakes ever recorded in Antarctica. To find out what was going on, they looked at data collected by the International GNSS service, which uses a network of tracking stations to observe changes in Earth's crust. They found that the magma chamber beneath the ice sheet was rising and expanding. What's more, the rate at which it's expanding seems to be increasing. But it's hard to say what this means for future eruptions because no one's actually seen the magma chamber itself. Plus, it's hard to study volcanoes when they're covered by thick ice. For instance, we don't even know how tall the volcano is. All we know is that it has a summit that's at least 2,700 meters above the surrounding ice sheet. Researchers hope that one day they can get more data, maybe even images of the magma chamber. But for now, they're keeping an eye on seismic activity in the area just in case. So, while Yellowstone might be the most famous supervolcano, it definitely isn't the only one to watch. With so many potentially active volcanoes around the world, it pays to keep an eye on all of them, whether they're under the sea or buried in ice or just hanging out in a national park.